Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue watching Kalani and Asuelu on 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
Since we've been back in Utah, we kind of just are around each other, and we haven't really talked about anything that's happened in Washington. I think we're kind of just avoiding the whole thing because it was really bad, and it kind of made me feel like I didn't even want to be married anymore.
By the way, as a resident of Washington, I find it odd that they keep referring to where they were as Washington. I'm pretty sure the producers are telling them to do that because no one, including in Utah, which is where they are, ironically, they're from Washington, Utah, but they keep saying Washington. I'm pretty sure where they were visiting was Vancouver, Washington, because they kept flying in and out of Portland, Oregon. And I think they were across the river, which is in Vancouver, Washington. Total speculation. The producers are saying, don't say Vancouver because people think of Canada, I'm guessing, and that'll throw everyone off because 90 days you're out of the country, or I don't know. So they just keep saying Washington, our trip to Washington, our trip to... No, I don't think anyone would say it like that. You would say Vancouver, Washington, or something, or the Pacific Northwest, or I don't know. It's just a pet peeve.
Well, when we were talking on the phone, we had talked about therapy. Have you been able to even talk to him about that?
Anytime I try to talk to him about something, he either says like, don't make me mad. If you make me mad, then like I don't want to talk.
Right. That's a completely dysfunctional way of dealing with conflict, is to say, if you bring up a topic, it's going to make me mad, and I can't have that, so we're not going to talk about it. In the John Gottman Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, he found, I've talked about this before, many of you know this, and I recommend reading some of John Gottman's books. They are written for the layperson and for the clinician, and they can be very helpful. They normalize a lot of things, give a direction. I teach it in my applied couples therapy classes. And through research, John Gottman here in Seattle would put couples in the lab. He would put cameras in their where they were living, and they would just observe couples. They would tell them to fight about something. They would observe them. And they would observe them over many years. And they would find that some couples would divorce and some couples would not. And then they would look back and say, what were the difference between those two groups? And one of the big differences was these 4 different behaviors that they saw that were highly predictive of divorce. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that these 4 behaviors that you can see in couples usually are the beginning of the end, or they contribute to the end or something. It's complicated. But the 4 behaviors they saw were criticism. So when you're criticizing someone a lot, and usually what we're referring to is criticizing someone's personality. Like, you are lazy. That's a criticism of someone's personality. To criticize the way someone puts dishes in the dishwasher, that's not necessarily criticizing their personality. You're giving them feedback. It could be considered criticism, but usually when we're talking about the John Gottman sense of criticism, we're saying, you're lazy, you never listen to me, you don't care, you're a terrible parent, you know, those kinds of, or things along those lines, messages around those lines. So that is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as John Gottman refers to it. The second one is contempt. So this is when you don't even like your partner in a certain way. There's just contempt. You're just like, oh, they just always do this thing and it just drives me crazy. Or, you know, rolling your eyes as, oh, here we go again. That's usually indicative of contempt, this narrative of you've just given up. You and your thing, you know. And if you have someone in your office that you work with that's like that, that's one thing. But if you're living with them and married to them, that can really degrade love and can obviously lead to divorce. The third horseman is defensiveness. Now, defensiveness is a little tricky because it's almost universal that couples will be defensive with each other. Hey, honey, I don't like the way you put dishes in the dishwasher. What do you mean? I do it the way you're supposed to do it. Okay, that's a defensive reaction. But what we're talking about in the John Gottman sense is a pattern of defensiveness and a lack of listening, a lack of stopping, or a lack of eventually listening. So you might say, hey, honey, you put the dishes in the dishwasher wrong. What do you mean? I do it the way I've always done it. Well, I don't like it when you put the bowls in this section right here because it kind of screws things up for me. Oh, okay. So in that instance, defensiveness at first, but eventually listening. So defensiveness, but inconsistent defensiveness, particularly when you are talking about some more critical issues like a big fight that you had. Defensiveness like, I didn't do that, or, well, that's only because you know, these kinds of things. That is also, and that's a pretty common one. Of all the four horsemen, defensiveness is something that most couples have. It's the other three you want to avoid. Obviously, contempt would be horrible, and criticism of their personality would be horrible. And then the fourth one is stonewalling, which is really one of the worst ones, which is what Asuelu is doing. Asuelu is saying, I don't want to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. You're just going to make me mad. I'm not going to talk about it. This is one of the most sure signs that a relationship is going to end in the near future. Now, why is this? Is it because someone's being a jerkface? Maybe. Is it because someone doesn't know how to handle conflict? Probably. Is it because they've fallen out of love with someone and they're just done? They don't want to put in that kind of effort? Maybe. I don't think Asuelu fits that category, but maybe he has. So why someone would stonewall? It's hard to know. I think it's often framed as a jerkface move, like they're choosing to stonewall because they're, you know, purposely trying to be a jerkface. I don't think that's usually the case. Now, I will say that men are more likely to stonewall. Men have been socialized to, one, stonewall more often. They've been socialized to gain power, particularly in heterosexual relationships with women. And they've also been socialized to not know their emotions and talk about their emotions. So sometimes they have no other recourse given their abilities that they've been taught. So anyway, that's what I'll say about that. Let's continue watching.
Yeah.
Let's just give up. I feel like I've tried my hardest with this marriage and I'm doing everything I can to fix it. I do feel like therapy has become an ultimatum now, and he's gonna have to go with me. And I know I have a lot of issues too that I need to work out, and he does too. So like, this is it.
So she said that it's almost an ultimatum. Now, on camera, he seemed to be up for it. Maybe behind the scenes, he's not so enthusiastic. But that often is the case, that couples will come into my office. I would say less so more recently, because I think people in Seattle are more, and younger people are more ready to go to therapy. But throughout my career, it wouldn't be unusual for one member of a couple to be sort of dragged in or not as enthusiastic. And that's okay. It is up to the therapist to win that person over.
Has to be it, because I can't keep living like this. It's insane. I don't know. I think he just thinks that American people have it backwards, and that I think he thought he'd come here and figure out how to put me in my place, and I'm
That's
not
not
one.
gonna work. Yeah.
I'm not one to be put into place.
So that is a narrative that is building in Kalani and I think in her family. That Asuelu is a sexist, misogynist. He's trying to control her. Is that a factor in their conflict? I think so. In any heterosexual relationship, that's going to be present at the very least. And is it a dominant factor, though? I don't know. That's not the way I would characterize it. She seems to have that as the primary reason why they're having conflict. It's that he can't handle her having a voice, that her having any kind of power. I don't think that's the main narrative. Is that part of it? You know, it's possible, it's probable. But I think the main problem is that he doesn't know how to talk about his feelings. He gets overwhelmed very quickly. He feels put down. She puts him down. And she's even doing this in this instance. And I would even say that she's also guilty of this power play, this power struggle. That's part of what the issue is that she's saying, well, he's trying to overpower me, but I think she's often overpowering him. The way she talks down to him, the way that even just in common conversation, when she observed him kissing his mom, she was, dripping with contempt around that. She was like, you were kissing him. It was disgusting, and continued to ridicule him like well after the fact, when it's like, why would you do that to someone? Even if they were kissing on the lips, like you don't know that maybe that's just how what are you saying? Do you think the mom and the son are having sex? Like, let it go. It's just how they greet each other. Maybe it's not how your family greets each other. You don't know how they do it. And why would you pick on that? Why wouldn't you just be like, oh, okay. I mean, maybe you say something a little like, you guys do that all the time? But she really laid into him. Now, I'm not saying she's to blame for all the problems. He's clearly to blame for a lot of it, if not most. I don't know. But this narrative that the only reason why they're having problems is because he's trying to gain power over her, I don't know if that's necessarily what's happening. I'm worried that if they go to therapy and a therapist doesn't agree with that she will also not want to go to therapy. But I don't know. Let's continue watching.
I think that when Asuelu was in Samoa, he was a good actor. I think that he fooled my daughter into thinking that he was something that he wasn't and was going to be something that he never intended to be.
Right, and that's another contemptuous narrative. Now, that could be true, and we often see this on this show. The in-laws will have these kinds of really horrible narratives, and it could be true. We can't get inside Asuelu's head. They know Asuelu better than I do, better than we do. But that isn't how it seems anyway, and people aren't usually like that. I think it's much more likely that he has traumas or immaturities or something, and it's really hard for him to cope in the moment. He doesn't know what to do. And he just takes these shortcuts and he has these ways of coping. I get the impression that he was never really an adult until, and never has been. And so I think before he and Kalani got pregnant, I think he was used to just being a free spirit and almost like an adult boy in a certain way. And that worked for him in his lifestyle and his family. And now all of a sudden, boom, 2 kids, paying bills, going to work, on a reality TV show, trying to navigate a relationship, maybe for the first, has he had a relationship in the past? Who knows? And I think he's just at a loss, and I think he has a lot to learn, but I think he can learn those things. And this narrative that he deviously tricked her, like I'm gonna give her this impression that I'm da-da-da-da-da, but really I'm this person. And as soon as I lock her down, then I'm gonna flip the script, and then I'm gonna win. Like, I'm exaggerating it, but I don't know if that's likely.
But at some point, he has to make a decision if it's worth him adjusting to life in America or wanting to just go back to Samoa and live the way that he's comfortable with.
Do you want to talk?
We can talk. I thought things that happened there in Portland, they're all put down the earth there.
He said Portland. Just to call back to, because they keep saying Washington. Portland isn't in Washington, it's in Oregon. So he said Portland. That's great. I don't know why that makes me happy. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.